Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more HOA Karen's stories. In today's Ripe Stories video, what would you do if you found out your local HOA board was using your private pool as their personal VIP lounge while you were away? According to them, they did not even break in, they claimed they had a legal right to do it. So yeah, I had enough of these ridiculous HOA meetings on my private property, and I was about to make them pay for every single burger. And the first one is from r/entitledpeople and is titled HOA board has secret pool parties at my house when I am out of town. So my wife and I have always been pretty quiet people. We keep to ourselves and we never really wanted to get involved in any neighborhood drama. When we bought our current house, we were so excited because it had an absolutely gorgeous backyard. I'm talking about a massive in-ground pool with a hot tub attached, a huge stone patio, a built-in grill area, and plenty of space for us to just relax after a long week of work. We spent a lot of time and money getting the backyard exactly how we wanted it. We added new patio furniture, installed some really nice ambient lighting, and made sure that the pool was perfectly maintained every single week by a professional pool service. We knew the house was in a neighborhood with an HOA, and at first we didn't think much of it. We figured it would just mean keeping the grass cut and making sure our house paint matched the neighborhood aesthetic. The HOA was run by a guy I would just call the HOA president. He was one of those guys who took his volunteer position too seriously. He strutted around the neighborhood like he owned the place. He was always poking his nose into other people's business and complaining about minor things like a single weed in a flower bed or a car parked slightly too far from the curb. We mostly ignored him and tried to stay off his radar. Because of our jobs though, my wife and I travel quite a bit. We often take extended trips out of town for work conferences or to visit family members who live out of state, and we never really announce when we are leaving. We just pack up our cars, make sure the house is locked up tight, and head out. We always thought our home was perfectly secure. We got a tall privacy fence around the entire backyard and a heavy gate that locks from the inside. The weirdness started a while back. We had just returned from a long trip visiting my wife's family, and we were exhausted and just wanted to unpack and relax. Well, we walked out to the backyard to check on the pool, and I noticed that things were just slightly off. The patio chairs were not in the exact spots where we left them. We always keep them pushed in around the table, but a few of them were pulled out and angled towards the pool. But the weirdest part was the trash cans. I opened one of the trash cans by the side of the house to throw away some mail, and it was completely full of empty beer cans and paper plates. For context, we don't drink that brand of beer, and we definitely didn't leave our trash cans full before we left. I asked my wife if she had any idea what was going on, but she was just as confused as I was. We brushed it off at first, thinking maybe the pool maintenance guys had brought their lunch and taken a break in our yard. It was annoying, but not something worth making a massive fuss over, but then it happened again. We took another trip a few weeks later, and this time we were gone for almost an entire week. When we got back, the backyard was a total mess. The pool water was cloudy, there were wet towels tossed over the backs of our patio chairs, and someone had used our expensive outdoor grill and left charred food stuck to the crates. There was even a plastic floaty in the pool that did not belong to us. I was absolutely furious. Someone was definitely coming into our backyard and using our pool while we were gone. I'm a pretty handy guy and I love technology, so I decided it was time to upgrade our home security. I bought a set of high-quality cameras that blend in perfectly with the exterior of the house. I installed one covering the side gate, one pointing directly at the pool, and one covering the grill area. These cameras connect directly to an app on my phone and send me motion alerts in real time. It didn't take long for my trip to spring. My wife and I had to leave town again for a mandatory work event, and we packed our bags, locked up the house, double-checked the gate, and hit the road. A few days into our trip, we were sitting in our hotel room, relaxing after a long day of meetings, and suddenly, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the backyard camera. My heart started racing. I opened the app and tapped on a live feed, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the screen. The side gate was wide open and the HOA president, the vice president, and 3 other people I recognized from the neighborhood were walking right into my backyard. They were all wearing swimsuits and carrying coolers, bags of chips and towels. I sat there in shock watching the live feed. They set their coolers down on my patio table. The vice president started opening up my grill and tossing burgers onto it. The others were laughing, opening beers, and jumping right into my pool. It was a full-blown pool party in my backyard and they were acting like they owned the place. I showed the screen to my wife and her jaw literally dropped. She was so angry that she was literally shaking. These people had absolutely zero right to be on our property. They were trespassing, using our utilities, messing up our pool, and eating food off our grill. I didn't want to just call the local police from a different city and hope they handled it. I wanted to catch them in the act and shut this down personally. Our work event was basically over anyway, so we packed our bags immediately. We checked out the hotel and drove straight home. The drive took a few hours and the entire time, my wife and I were checking the live feed and the party was still going strong. They were splashing around, playing loud music on a portable speaker they brought, and generally treating my expansive backyard like a public resort. When we finally pulled up to our house, I parked a little ways down the street so they wouldn't hear my car. My wife and I walked up to our front door completely silent. I checked the camera feed one last time, and they were all sitting around the patio table eating the burgers they cooked on my grill. I unlocked my front door, walked through the house and stepped out onto the back patio. The silence that fell over the group was absolute perfection. The music was still playing but nobody was talking. The vice president literally dropped the burger on the concrete patio. The HOA president froze with a beer halfway to his mouth. They all just stared at us in pure unfiltered shock. "What in the world are you people doing in my backyard?" I demanded, keeping my voice loud and firm. The HOA president scrambled to his feet. He puffed out his chest, trying to look authoritative even though he was dripping wet in floral swim trunks. He cleared his throat and tried to put on a brave face. "Now hold on a minute," the HOA president said, gesturing with his beer can. "There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for this. We are conducting official HOA business." Ha! I actually laughed out loud. It was not a happy laugh though, it was a laugh of pure disbelief. Official business? You are swimming in my pool, using my grill and drinking beer on my patio. How is any of this official business? "This is an official board meeting," he replied, pointing to the rest of the group. "As the HOA board, we are required to meet regularly to discuss neighborhood matters. And according to the bylaws, the board has the right to access any property within the community for inspections and official business. We decided to hold our meeting here today to inspect your pool facilities and discuss landscaping improvements." I stared at him, genuinely amazed at the absolute nonsense coming out of his mouth. "You're completely out of your mind. There's no rule that says you can throw a pool party in my private backyard just because you're on the board. You're trespassing here." "We're not trespassing," the vice president chimed in, crossing her arms defensively. "We are authorized personnel. We have every right to be here. You should be thanking us for taking the time to inspect your property." "Get out," my wife said, stepping forward. Her voice was shaking with anger, but she stood her ground. "Get your damn coolers, your towels, and get out of our yard right now before we call the cops." The HOA president scoffed and rolled his eyes. "You cannot call the cops on the HOA board. We govern this neighborhood. We have the authority here, not you. If you try to call the authorities, I will personally ensure you are fined for every single minor infraction I can find on your property. Your grass is a little long and the paint on your trim is fading, and I'm pretty sure your mailbox is the wrong shade of white." He was legit trying to intimidate us. He thought because he had some fake power in the neighborhood, he could just bully us into letting him do whatever he wanted, but he picked the wrong people to mess with. I didn't say another word to him. I pulled out my phone and dialed the local police dispatch. I calmly explained that I'd just returned home from a trip and found 5 people trespassing in my backyard, swimming in my pool, and refusing to leave. The dispatcher said officers were already on their way, and when the HOA president heard me talking to the dispatcher, his face went pale, the false confidence completely vanished, and the other board members started panicking. They scrambled to grab their towels and their coolers, slipping on the wet concrete in their rush to pack up. "You are making a huge mistake," the HOA president hissed at me as he shoved his feet into his sandals. "You're gonna regret this. We are the board and we control everything here." "You don't control my private property," I replied calmly, "and you definitely don't control the police. I have everything on camera. Every single time you people came into my yard, I caught it on video." "You are done." They tried to run out the side gate before the cops arrived, but they were not fast enough. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the front of my house just as the board members were squeezing through the gate. The officers stepped out and immediately intercepted them. I walked around to the front yard and explained the entire situation to the officers. I showed them the live feed footage on my phone, which clearly showed the group entering my locked gate, using my grill and swimming in my pool, and I also explained how we had found our backyard trashed on previous occasions and how the HOA president just admitted that they were doing this under the guise of official board meetings. The officers were completely unamused by the HOA president's excuses. He tried to give them the same ridiculous speech about the bylaws and his authority to inspect properties, but the officers shut him down immediately. Sir, an HOA bylaw does not override state law regarding private property and trespassing. The lead officer explained sternly, you cannot just enter someone's fenced-in backyard without their explicit permission, regardless of your position on a neighborhood board. The HOA president looked like he was about to argue, but the officer held up a hand. If you argue with me, I will arrest you right now for trespassing and breaking and entering, do you understand? The HOA president finally shut his mouth and nodded, looking completely defeated and humiliated. The rest of the board members were looking down at the ground, too embarrassed to even speak up. Several of our other neighbors had come outside to see what the commotion was all about, and they were all watching the HOA board in their swimsuits get reprimanded by the police. The officers formally trespassed every single one of them from our property, and that meant if they ever stepped foot on our land again, they would be immediately arrested. The police also took a detailed report of the incident and gave me a copy for my records. After the police forced them to walk back to their own houses, my wife and I went back inside. We were exhausted, but we were also incredibly satisfied. We finally caught the people who had been trashing our backyard, and we shut them down in the most spectacular way possible. But I was not done yet. I wanted to make sure these people could never abuse their power again. I contacted a lawyer and I brought him the police report, all the video footage from my security cameras and a copy of the actual HOA bylaw document, and I asked him to review the specific clause the HOA president was trying to use to justify his trespassing. My lawyer laughed when he read it. The clause the president mentioned was strictly for emergency situations like a burst pipe or a structural issue that threaten neighboring homes. It specifically stated that the homeowner must be given proper notice before any inspection, and it absolutely didn't grant the board permission to use private amenities for recreational purposes, so with my lawyer's help we drafted a very formal, legally binding cease and desist demand. And by the way guys, if you would have been in this situation, how would you have dealt with this? Would you have contacted a lawyer as well? Let me know in the comments. We also requested full reimbursement for the cost of fixing the pool chemicals, cleaning the patio, and replacing the food they ate. We sent this demand directly to the HOA's legal counsel, along with copies of the video evidence, and the HOA's legal team was absolutely terrified. They knew the board members had committed serious crimes and opened the entire association up to a massive lawsuit. The legal team immediately advised the board to pay our demands in full out of the HOA's insurance fund, and they sent us a written apology. But the best part was the community fallout. I made sure to print out copies of the police report and a summary of the situation, and I personally handed them out to every single neighbor on our street. The neighborhood was absolutely outraged. Nobody likes paying HOA fees, but paying them to a group of entitled people who use that money and power to throw secret pool parties in private backyards was just the final straw. A special community meeting was called by the residents. HOA president tried to defend himself, but nobody wanted to hear it. The community held an immediate vote of no confidence, and the entire board was ousted that very night. A new board was elected, made up of reasonable normal neighbors who actually care about the community and respect private property, and the old HOA president was completely disgraced. And now guys, my opinion about this story. So honestly, this is also a liability nightmare. I mean, what happens if one of them slips, cracks their head on the patio, and then suddenly claims the homeowner's property was unsafe? People don't really think about that kind of stuff until it really happens. That alone would make me go nuclear. You don't get to break into someone's pool area and then create a potential lawsuit for them. I would rather kick them out. Let me know what you would have done if you would have been in this situation. And a user from Reddit said, this is exactly why I told my realtor that I would rather live in a yurt in the middle of nowhere than buy a house with an active HOA. It attracts a very specific type of middle-aged suburbanite who has absolutely zero control over their own life, so they seek out a fake position of authority just to feel something. I imagine having so little going on that you convince yourself a state-level trespassing law does not apply to you because you are the so-called vice president of a subdivision with 40 houses. And another Reddit comment said, honestly, the best investment you made was those hidden cameras. If you didn't have that live footage, this would have been a he said, she said nightmare. They would have claimed that they were just looking over the fence to check a code violation and you were fabricating the whole pool party stuff. So yeah, always document everything. The next one is from r/malicious compliance and is titled, You don't have the authority to say no to customers. So this is a story from almost a decade ago now when I was promoted to assistant service manager for a large chain health food grocery store. For reference as to what people actually mean for our store, there were only 2 people who outranked myself and the other 2 managers at my same level. There was an assistant store director and the store director, hereafter known as SD. Our day-to-day responsibilities included making sure that each apartment was getting all their work completed, making sure shelves were staying stocked, cashiering when necessary, counting money and making change for the registers, and most importantly to this story, approving returns. I worked super hard to get that position by learning the ins and outs of the store and picking up shifts in every single department. When I was promoted to the position, I was the youngest person in company history to reach that level. I don't mean that as a humble brag, just to illustrate that I did know what I was talking about on a lot of things, but I was young, so many people didn't take me seriously. So like I mentioned before though, it was my job to approve the returns. If a customer brought in something for a return, the cashier would do all the work for the return, including checking for a receipt, figuring out what the problem was, and determining how they could make it better for the customer, exchange, store credit, refund, and so on. And they would call me over at the end of the exchange and I would check to make sure it was all in order, then insert a key, type in a code, and the return would go through. Now, I would like to think that I was a reasonable person when it came to what I would approve and not approve. If someone came back with spoiled food, I almost always gave them the benefit of the doubt that they stored it right and it was a faulty product. Spoiler, it's almost always their fault. If someone did not like the taste of something, I would always do the return. Even when something was slightly past the expiration date, I would try to work with them and maybe give them an exchange. Where I drew the line was absolutely ridiculous things. People would do things like come in without a receipt or the product and try to get a return saying something like, I got some insert food here and it was bad so I threw it away, I would like a return. Okay, so sorry, I'm not gonna do that. Also, if you bring in something we don't even sell at our store, I'm obviously not gonna return it for you. Now, like I said before, I was young at the time, so a lot of older adults would not take me seriously. They couldn't understand someone so young could be the manager they wanted to speak to. So one day, an irate customer wanted to speak to a manager about a return. My cashier called me, and I do my best to figure out how I can help them. They want a return on chicken that was 3 months expired. It smelled exactly like you would expect, and my cashier was almost dry heaving from the stench. So then I say in my best customer service voice, I'm sorry ma'am, but we won't be able to do a return on this today. It's obviously way past its expiration date. If you would like, we can dispose of it for you. She would not have any of it though. She is now yelling about how she deserves a refund. Now, we had cameras in the store and so SD sees the commotion and comes out from his office to save the day. Please read this as sarcastically as you can. He tells the lady, oh, I'm so sorry that he was saying we cannot do a refund on this. Of course we'll do that. It didn't have a barcode, so he had no idea what it originally cost, but he gave the lady a $20 gift card to the store right there. I'm fuming at this point because he just made me look like a powerless idiot in front of a bunch of customers, but we were busy so I keep doing my job. About an hour later he calls me into his office. I would type out the whole conversation, but it's pointless because it all boils down to him telling me multiple times explicitly that I was not allowed to say no to a return. I was to approve all returns because customer satisfaction is more important than a little lost revenue, blah blah blah. So I think this is the stupidest thing ever, but I'm a good employee and I like getting paid, so I kept my mouth shut. I do think from the title and where we stand in the story up to now, you can all figure out where this goes. Fast forward a few weeks and a customer comes in. During Christmas time, we had sold little 1 to 2 foot tall Christmas trees in small pots. It was now June, and this lady wanted to return her Christmas tree that now made the Charlie Brown tree look full and healthy. It did not have a single needle on it, and the trunk was rotting already. Normally, I would tell her in the most polite way I could that there was no way in hell I would do that. I had specific instructions though, and I was sure as heck gonna follow them. As part of the return, and while trying not to laugh, I asked her why she wanted to return it, and she told me flat out, "Well, it didn't do what I was expecting it to." Now, I don't know what she expected, but I personally don't buy a Christmas tree thinking it's gonna live forever. I completed the return though and sent her on her way. Where did I take that Christmas tree, you might ask? Well, if you guessed straight to the SD's desk for him to find the next morning, you would be a winner. I had the next day off, but the nice note I left him explained the whole situation, and the next day when I came back, he immediately called me back in. I was expecting the worst because leaving it on his desk with a note was a little aggressive, but all he said was, "Maybe from now on you can say no sometimes, just use your best judgment." It was one of the greatest victories ever, and it took all my self-restraint not to say something sarcastic about how that should have been the case all along. Anyways, I hope you liked my first story here on Reddit. If you guys like it, I can tell you the story of how I got fired from there sometime. Edit. Sorry, this response took so long, folks. Here's the story of how I get fired from there, so I'm doing it as an edit instead of responding to all the different people. So at any store that sells beer, there are bound to be cases where some of those beers break or get stolen. This basically leaves the rest of the beers in that pack or case unsellable, at least for our store. I've seen lots of stores start selling make your own six-pack to use these up, but anyway, our store policy was that all unsellable beers went into a dairy crate in the back, and whenever the dairy crate was full, any employee could buy all of the beers in the dairy crate for $10. Considering I could fit between 30 and 40 beers into a dairy crate, this was an awesome deal. Especially when the craft beers broke and the case was full of stone beer. Now at the time though, I was 20 years old, legally not allowed to buy alcohol for all non-US readers. Ironically though, I was the beer department manager though, so I was responsible for stocking the beer and placing the orders with the vendor. Because of this I knew when the dairy crate was full and I knew what beers were in it, so it reached a point where I wanted to buy all of the beer in the crate. I spoke to one of the other managers at my same rank and she was cool with it and agreed to help me out. I cashiered while she went to the back, got the beer crate, paid for it herself, and took it out to her car, aka my car. We didn't have security cameras in the parking lots and everything that was on camera was 100% legit, just me selling alcohol and a legal adult buying it. Now 3 months go by and nothing happened, so I'd honestly forgotten about it. One day, though, the store director calls me into his office the moment I walk into the store. He has the company president, VP, loss prevention, security boss, and the other manager who had sold me the alcohol crying in the corner of his office. She had already caved, so there was nothing I could really do. Even though nothing illegal had taken place, they were nervous about their liquor license, so I was fired on the spot. Now, how did they find out about this whole thing 3 months later? It turns out the third manager at my level, from now on to be called Evil Lady, always hated the lady who helped me buy the alcohol, now to be known as Sweet Little Old Lady, so Sweet Little Old Lady was 2 weeks away from 30 years with the company when she was fired. She was the nicest lady you could ever meet and every customer loved her. She was however not the best manager. The store didn't look as great on nights she closed. So then 3 months after I bought the alcohol, Evil Lady opened the day after Sweet Little Old Lady. She was not happy about the state of the store, so that is when she decided to report us. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled, "When is lunch?" So I worked at night fixing machinery, an easy gig. When something broke, they would call me and I would fix it, and oddly enough, things refused to break on a schedule. Often I would clock out for lunch just before the end of the shift, clock back in, then clock off and go home, and for me, my lunch was flexible. If I was fixing something with many people standing around not able to work, I just fixed it. Occasionally I had to warm my lunch in the microwave several times before I had time to eat it. Most nights though were slow and I could eat anytime I wanted. Sometimes I would get a call during lunch and I would go fix it. It was somewhat awkward to keep looking at the clock, stop what I was fixing to go clock back on, but I was yelled at. I was told I had to take a full 30-minute lunch off the clock on schedule and could not work when I was off the clocks. So I mentioned that when I worked a different job at the same company years before, the truck stop down the road had great steak and eggs. Maybe they still do? Boss said I cannot leave the property. I told him 1, if I'm off the clock you damn sure won't be seeing me because I won't be here. Number 2, in 10 years I've never had a scheduled time for lunch. And 3, you pick the 30 minutes during the night when absolutely nothing gets fixed because I'm off the clock and or gone. I never heard another word. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow and please don't forget to check out my playlist.